In the heart of a small rural town in Brazil, nestled between endless stretches of dense forest and winding, muddy rivers, the air always carries a faint chill, even in the heat of summer. The town of São Gabriel, with its weathered wooden houses and narrow dirt roads, feels like a place frozen in time, where ancient superstitions linger in every whispered conversation. It's a place where the crowing of a rooster at dawn is a call to work the fields, and the sight of a black bird perched on a windowsill can send shivers down the spine of even the most hardened farmer. Here, the disappearance of Lucas Almeida, a quiet 27-year-old man with deep-set eyes and a reserved nature, would unravel a mystery that still haunts the town to this day. Lucas lived alone in a modest home on the edge of São Gabriel, a house painted in fading yellow, with creaking floorboards and windows that rattled in the wind. He was known as a solitary figure, often seen walking the forest trails with a worn leather journal tucked under his arm, scribbling notes no one ever read. To the townsfolk, he was a man of few words, someone who kept to himself but never caused trouble. That is, until the night of October 17, 2019, when Lucas vanished without a trace. The last person to see him was his neighbor, Dona Clara, a wiry old woman with a sharp tongue and sharper memory. She recalled seeing Lucas late that evening, standing at the edge of his property, staring into the darkening woods as if something, or someone, was watching him back. His face, she said, was pale, his hands trembling as he clutched that journal like it was his lifeline. When she called out to him, he didn't respond, just turned and walked back into his house, shutting the door with a heavy thud. The next morning, Lucas was gone. His door was unlocked, his bed unmade, and his journal was nowhere to be found. A pot of coffee sat cold on the stove, as if he'd planned to return any minute. But he never did. The townsfolk whispered among themselves, their voices tinged with unease. Some said he'd simply left, tired of the suffocating small-town life. Others, though, spoke of darker things, of curses and omens, of the forest that seemed to swallow people whole. And then, 3 days after Lucas disappeared, something strange happened. A large black crow, its feathers glinting like polished obsidian, landed on the windowsill of his empty home. It sat there, motionless, its piercing eyes fixed on the inside of the house, as if it knew something the rest of the world didn't. Dona Clara, who saw it first, crossed herself and muttered a prayer under her breath. In São Gabriel, a crow wasn't just a bird. It was a messenger of death, a harbinger of tragedy. Word of the crow spread like wildfire, and soon, the once quiet town was buzzing with fear and speculation. What had happened to Lucas Almeida? And why had this ominous bird chosen his window, of all places, to make its perch? As the days turned into weeks, the mystery only deepened, pulling the community into a web of suspicion and dread. If you're as gripped by this story as we are, drop the word crow in the comments below to let us know you're following along. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button to join us as we uncover more chilling mysteries like this one. The search for Lucas began in earnest on the 4th day after his disappearance, when his older sister, Mariana, arrived from the city of Belo Horizonte, some 300 kilometers away. Mariana, a determined woman in her early 30s with a no-nonsense attitude, refused to believe her brother had simply walked away. She rallied the townsfolk, organizing search parties to comb through the sprawling forest that bordered São Gabriel. The woods were a labyrinth of towering eucalyptus trees and tangled underbrush, where the damp earth sucked at boots and the air was thick with the scent of rotting leaves. Mist hung low in the early mornings, obscuring paths and turning every shadow into a potential clue. The searchers moved in grim silence, their calls for Lucas echoing unanswered through the trees. They checked abandoned shacks, scoured riverbanks for footprints, and even dragged nets through the murky waters of the nearby Rio Preto, fearing the worst. But there was no sign of him, no torn clothing, no dropped belongings, nothing to suggest he'd ever set foot in those woods. As the days dragged on, exhaustion set in, and tempers flared. Mariana clashed with the local police, a small force led by Officer Roberto Silva, who insisted Lucas had likely run off to escape debts or personal troubles. But Mariana wouldn't hear it. She pointed to the state of his house, untouched except for the cold coffee and unmade bed, as proof that something sinister had happened. Meanwhile, the story of the crow grew in the telling. More people claimed to have seen it, always near Lucas's house, always watching with those unblinking black eyes. Some of the older residents recalled folktales passed down through generations, stories of crows as guardians of lost souls, or as servants of something far darker. One man, a grizzled farmer named Joao, swore he'd seen the bird flutter its wings and caw 3 times before flying off into the forest, as if beckoning someone to follow. The younger generation scoffed at such talk, but even they couldn't shake the unease that settled over São Gabriel like a shroud. Mariana, though torn between skepticism and desperation, began to wonder if there was more to the crow than mere coincidence. Late at night, as she sat in Lucas's empty house, she could almost feel a presence lingering just beyond the walls, waiting for her to notice. And on the 7th night of the search, as rain pounded the tin roof and thunder rolled in the distance, she heard it, a sharp, guttural caw, right outside the window. She froze, her breath catching in her throat, as she turned to see the silhouette of the crow against the storm-lit sky, its head tilted, as if studying her, before it spread its wings and vanished into the night. Was it a sign, a warning, or was her mind playing tricks in the grip of grief? The answers, it seemed, were still buried somewhere in the shadows of São Gabriel. With the journal providing more questions than answers, the investigation began to fracture. The regional police, frustrated by the lack of concrete evidence, started to pull back, leaving Officer Silva and a handful of locals to carry on. Mariana, however, refused to give up. She spent hours poring over Lucas's writings, trying to decode the cryptic phrases and half-formed thoughts. She began to notice patterns, mentions of specific locations in the forest, marked with crude sketches of trees and what looked like a crude altar. Against Silva's warnings, she ventured into the woods alone, armed with a flashlight and a map she'd pieced together from the journal. The forest at night was a different beast, a place where every rustle of leaves sounded like footsteps, and every snap of a twig felt like a warning. Mariana's heart pounded as she followed the faint trails, her flashlight beam trembling with each step. She found the first marker, a gnarled tree with a deep carving in its bark, just as Lucas had drawn. Nearby, she stumbled upon a clearing, the ground littered with strange symbols scratched into the dirt, surrounded by what looked like the remnants of a fire. The air here felt heavy, oppressive, as if the forest itself was holding its breath. And then she saw it, the crow, perched on a low branch, its eyes glinting in the dark. It didn't move, didn't caw, just watched her with an intensity that made her skin crawl. Mariana's courage faltered, and she turned to leave, but not before noticing something half buried in the soil. A scrap of fabric, torn and stained, that matched the shirt Lucas had been wearing the night he disappeared. She dug frantically with her hands, uncovering more fragments, but no body, no definitive proof. When she looked up, the crow was gone, leaving behind only the echo of its presence. Back in town, she showed the fabric to Silva, who sent it for forensic analysis, though he warned her not to get her hopes up. The discovery reignited interest in the case, drawing amateur sleuths and curious outsiders to São Gabriel. Theories multiplied. Some claimed Lucas had been taken by a secret society, others that he'd fallen victim to a vengeful spirit tied to the forest. The crow, always the crow, remained at the center of every story, a symbol of something no one could name. Officer Silva, a pragmatic man, dismissed it all as nonsense, but even he couldn't ignore the chill that crept up his spine when he passed Lucas's house at night and saw those empty windows staring back like hollow eyes. The deeper the police dug, the murkier the case became, and the more it seemed that São Gabriel itself held secrets no one was ready to face. If you think this is gripping, trust us, the best is yet to come. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss what's next in this haunting tale. Months turned into a year, and the case of Lucas Almeida remained unsolved, a wound that refused to heal for the town of São Gabriel. The forensic results on the fabric Mariana found were inconclusive. Yes, it was likely his, but there was no blood, no DNA to suggest violence, just the lingering mystery of where it had been found. The police officially classified Lucas as a missing person, a cold case to be revisited only if new evidence emerged. But for Mariana and a few others, the search never truly ended. They returned to the forest sporadically, always with a mix of hope and dread, combing through the same trails, revisiting the clearing with its eerie symbols. It was during one such search, on a foggy autumn morning, that a local boy, barely 15, stumbled upon something that would change everything. Deep in the heart of the forest, far beyond the paths anyone had dared to tread, he found a hidden cave, its entrance obscured by overgrown vines. Inside, the air was damp and cold, the walls slick with moss. And there, in the dim light filtering through cracks in the rock, lay a collection of objects that sent a chill through his bones. A pile of bones, too scattered to identify, alongside trinkets and carvings that mirrored the symbols from the clearing. Among them was a leather journal, weathered but intact, its pages filled with Lucas's handwriting. The final entry, dated the night he disappeared, read, "I tried to run, but it found me. If anyone reads this, don't look for me. Don't follow the crow." The boy, trembling, brought the journal to Officer Silva, who called in experts to analyze the bones. The results were inconclusive, some human, some animal, too degraded to provide a clear answer. Was Lucas among them, or had he left this as a final warning before fleeing something unimaginable? The cave became a focal point of speculation, with some claiming it was a site of ancient rituals, others insisting it was a dumping ground for unspeakable crimes. And still, the crow appeared, now seen near the cave's entrance by those who dared to approach. Its presence felt like a taunt, a reminder that the truth might never be fully known. For Mariana, the journal's words were a dagger to the heart, a plea from her brother to let him go. Yet she couldn't, not while questions lingered, not while the forest whispered its secrets in the wind. Sao Gabriel remains a town marked by loss, where every caw of a bird stirs memories of a young man who slipped into the shadows. What do you think happened to Lucas? Was the crow a mere observer or something more? Share your theories in the comments, we're dying to hear them. And if this story gripped you, subscribe now to join us for more mysteries that will keep you up at night. Let's keep this conversation going. Tell us, what's the creepiest detail of this case for you?